Imagine having an arch nemesis who once defeated you in battle, and one day you wake up to discover that this person's face is plastered everywhere you look. You see it on people's shirts, jackets, hoodies, hats, posters, license plate covers. Everywhere you look, it seems the people of your region are honoring this fiend that you despise. That would be kind of a bitter pill to swallow, wouldn't you say? Now, this may come as a shock to you, but the scenario I just described may very well be at the heart of what has haunted the Minnesota Vikings for all these years. Truth often hides in plain sight. And here on NFL Lore, I seek to uncover the truth by taking you beyond the rational, into places you may have never thought of searching. Probably because you're a little too scared, but that's okay. Now, what's curious about this situation with the Vikings is they have had their share of moderate success throughout the years. When we think of franchises that have historically been laughingstocks to New York Jets, the Vikings don't immediately come to mind. But when we think of franchises that may be suffering from a curse, they sit right there at the head of the table, right next to the Buffalo Bills, who we will get into in a future episode. So what is it that could be at the root of this issue? And more importantly, what can you, the brave-hearted people of Minnesota, do about it? Well, you'll be happy to know that I intend to answer that question and more, this time on NFL Lore. There is no better way to embark upon this journey than to start right at the beginning. Minnesota boasts a deep Scandinavian heritage, with roots embedded in the cultures of Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Iceland. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, waves of Scandinavian immigrants settled in the region, bringing with them their unique traditions, values, and way of life. Now, I want you to remember that because it will come into play later in this episode. When the NFL granted Minnesota an expansion franchise in 1960, team executives and local sports writers launched a contest to name the new team. Among the suggestions were names like Miners, Chippewas, and Voyagers. The ownership group ultimately selected Vikings, a name that honored the region's Scandinavian heritage and embodied the strength, resilience, and adventurous spirit they wanted the team to represent. The team was initially part of the NFL's Western Conference and played its first game on September 17th of 1961, handily defeating the Chicago Bears by a score of 37-13. Sorry, Bears fans, I didn't mean to sound so happy about that. But despite that early success, Minnesota's first few years in existence were rather subpar, until they hired the great Bud Grant in 1967, who was an interesting man, to say the least. I mean, the man won an NBA championship as a player with the Minneapolis Lakers in 1950 before transitioning to the NFL, where he played for the Philadelphia Eagles and then later the Winnipeg Blue Bombers of the CFL. He then went on to coach the Blue Bombers and became the youngest coach in CFL history at 29 years old, and he led them to 6 Grey Cup appearances and 4 championships. And it was under Bud Grant's leadership that the Vikings eventually rose to prominence. He led them to 11 divisional titles and 4 Super Bowl appearances. And although the team never secured a Super Bowl victory, Grant's impact was profound. He emphasized discipline, preparation, and a calm demeanor, which all became hallmarks of his coaching style. His overall coaching record with the Vikings was 158 wins, 96 losses, 5 ties, making him the winningest coach in franchise history. And Grant's contributions extended well beyond his coaching record. He was instrumental in developing the Purple People Eaters, one of the most feared defenses in NFL history, featuring players like Carl Eller, Jim Marshall, and Alan Page. His legacy was cemented with his induction into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1994, and he was also inducted into the Canadian Football Hall of Fame in 1993, making him the first person ever to be inducted into both Halls of Fame. And in case you don't know, the Vikings' 4 Super Bowl losses came to the Kansas City Chiefs, the stupid Miami Dolphins, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Oakland Raiders in that order. And even after Grant's departure in the mid-1980s, the team still continued to find success. Jerry Burns led them to 3 playoff appearances and 1 conference championship in his 6 years as head coach, and Dennis Green led them to 8 playoff appearances and 2 conference championships in his 10 years as head coach. And even after Green and up until now, the Vikings have had sporadic playoff appearances under a multitude of head coaches. Now, what's impressive is since the merger, the Vikings have never gone more than 4 consecutive years without a playoff appearance, and even after Green, they still made the conference championship 2 more times, and, well, as you know, lost. But still, that is a lot of winning over a 30-plus year span, but unfortunately, nothing really to show for it. Not only that, but the way they lost some of these games was nothing short of remarkable. And yes, I am going to mention the 1998 NFC Championship game against the Atlanta Falcons. For the younger crowd, I'll explain this as thoroughly as possible without spending too much time on it for the sake of the poor bastards who actually lived through it. The Vikings were 15-1 that season and faced the 14-2 Atlanta Falcons in the NFC Championship game. Their kicker, Gary Anderson, lined up for a field goal attempt from 39 yards out that would have given Minnesota a 10-point lead with 2 minutes to go in the game. Before I continue, I want to frame this in a way that will do it justice. Anderson was automatic. There was no way he was missing this kick. There was no crowd interference because it was a home game. There was no weather interference because it was played in a dome. And Anderson had not missed a field goal all season long. He was 35 for 35 on the season and 14 for 14 from 40 yards out. This was a chip shot, and he missed it. The man missed it. I'm sorry, this drudges up emotion in me, and I am not even a Vikings fan. I mean, there are no words. Now, this next example I'm about to offer pales in comparison to the Anderson thing, but it's still worth mentioning. And that is the 2015 wildcard game in Seattle. Now, despite that game being played in sub-zero temperatures, Vikings kicker Blair Walsh had already hit field goals from 47 yards and 43 yards out. He also hit another one from 22 yards out. So naturally, when he lined up for a 27-yard field goal that would have put the Vikings up 12-10 with 26 seconds left in the game, everyone thought, well, game over. But the kick sailed wide left, and the Vikings lost 10-9. I know I tried to foreshadow a Blair Witch joke here in the last episode of NFL High School because it sounds like Blair Walsh, but you know, I don't think it's appropriate. My heart bleeds for you, Vikings fans, and that is why I went the extra mile in trying to figure out how you can overcome whatever dark force is doing this to you. And much like I do in these cases, I scoured horror movies, both modern and old, along with books and short stories of the horror ilk. And while there were certain things that stood out that I could have possibly linked a curse or something of that nature to, they all felt like reaches. And I did not want to shortchange you, so I continued to think and think and think. Then, as if my higher self spoke to me, two words suddenly came to mind that led me down a path for what I believe to be our legitimate answers. And those two words are Norse mythology. I mean, it's so simple, right? As I said earlier, the truth behind dark magic and curses generally hides in plain sight. Where better to find out what might be tormenting a team called the Vikings than to explore old texts that focus specifically on their lore. Now, when it comes to Norse mythology, there are a lot of paths we can journey down, but luckily for you, I happen to be a Norse mythology connoisseur. Okay, well, maybe not a connoisseur per se, but I do really enjoy it. It was in Johan Egerkron's fantastic book, The Undead, where I found something that led me to answers. And that something is the Draug. Also known as Draugr, it's basically the same thing. Draug are undead creatures from Norse mythology known for their terrifying strength and malevolence. And Glommer is one of the most famous Draug in Norse mythology. His story is prominently featured in the saga of Grettir the Strong, one of the Icelandic sagas, and it goes something like this. Glommer was a shepherd in Iceland, known for his ill temper and disdain for Christian customs. One Yule night, you know, the time we all call Christmas time in today's world, during a fierce storm, Glommer mysteriously died and soon returned as a Draug. His spirit haunted the valley, killing livestock and driving people from their homes. His glowing red eyes became a symbol of fear. Well, Grettir the Strong, a famed hero in Norse mythology, caught wind of what Glommer was doing and decided, as heroes often do, he wasn't having it. He decided to confront Glommer, and the two had a brutal battle. Grettir ultimately defeated the Draug, but with his dying breath, Glommer cursed Grettir. The curse foretold that misfortune would follow Grettir. His strength would fade and he would meet a lonely end. And as it turned out, Glommer's haunting presence and his ominous curse did cast a shadow over Grettir's life, leaving a legacy of misfortune and tragedy that followed him all the way until his end. So what can we take away from this story? Well, remember when I said this? Minnesota boasts a deep Scandinavian heritage, with roots embedded in the cultures of Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Iceland. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, waves of Scandinavian immigrants settled in the region, bringing with them their unique traditions, values, and way of life. Now, I want you to remember that, because it will come into play later in this episode. And it is coming into play right now. As you now know, centuries after the Battle of Grettir and Glommer, Scandinavian settlers arrived in Minnesota, bringing with them legends of the old country. Could it be that possibly amongst those settlers, there were descendants of those who lived in the same regions of Iceland that were haunted by Glommer? And unbeknownst to them, they carried with them artifacts and stories that perhaps awakened this ancient malevolent force. I mean, stranger things have happened. Now, Grettir the Strong, as described in the Icelandic sagas, is depicted as a formidable, burly hero, known for his incredible physical strength and rugged appearance. He would typically be imagined as a tough, weathered warrior with traditional Viking attire, including a helmet, though historically Viking helmets did not have horns. And he would have likely had long hair and a beard, much like the other Norse warriors of his time. Does that description sound familiar to you? Now, to us, this just looks like a generic Viking. And as far as we know, that's probably all it is. But if you view the situation through the glowing red evil eyes of Glommer, Well, that brings me back to the statement I opened up with. Imagine having an arch nemesis who once defeated you in battle, and one day you wake up to discover that this person's face is plastered everywhere you look. You see it on people's shirts, jackets, hoodies, hats, posters, license plate covers. Everywhere you look, it seems the people of your region are honoring this fiend that you despise. I mean, if I were Glommer in this scenario, I would think, oh, you want to honor my nemesis, huh? Okay. Situations like this, by the way, are how evil spirits become rageful spirits. Now, you're probably wondering, how do you break a curse like this? Well, changing the team's name and logo and erasing its history is probably a good start, but that's likely not a realistic option. Another way to go would be to wait the Draug out and see if he loses interest, but since there's a vengeance angle here, I don't see that happening. See, one of the problems you come across with entities that have vengeance angles is they love to use the word eternity in their cursing structure. And try as I might, I can't think of another driving force that would be as enticing to Glommer than torturing the people who have decided to honor his eternal enemy. But I don't want to leave you without hope, so I will offer a solution. Now, I'm going to outline a 5-step process, but keep in mind, as I've stated in my other videos, breaking a curse is not easy. So you might want to consider requesting some time off work or sending the kids to grandma's for a few weeks to make time in your schedule. Step 1 involves rediscovering Glommer's grave in Iceland. See, I told you, you're gonna need time for this. Now, you might need to hire a historian, and also perhaps purchase some proper ice traveling equipment before you embark upon this journey, but as you're spending thousands doing that, just keep reminding yourself, this is all for a good cause. And you should also probably know that there might be Bears, Packers, and Lions fans also watching this who will dedicate their lives to thwarting your attempt at doing this, so while you're in Iceland, it might be a good idea to keep an eye out for anybody wearing those team colors. Now, let's say you do locate the grave. Good for you. Understand that Glommer's unrest is partly due to his improper burial. And to lay his spirit to rest, you would need to perform traditional Norse burial rites. This might involve seeking the guidance of an expert in Norse mythology to ensure that the rituals are properly conducted. Now, the historian may be able to help you here, or perhaps he or she knows someone. Step 3 involves forging a symbolic weapon. In Norse mythology, weapons and artifacts hold great power, so you may need to create a replica of Grettir's sword. Now, you can use traditional materials and methods and get those materials blessed by a modern day Norse priest or priestess, or you can just check Etsy, maybe you'll get lucky and someone already made one that you can just buy. And that brings us to step 4, which is a battle reenactment. Since the curse was born out of battle, it might require a symbolic reenactment of the battle between Grettir and Glommer to break it. This could possibly be held at the Viking Stadium during halftime of a home game. In this reenactment, however, the person playing Glommer, the Draug, would wield the symbolic weapon, and he must reign victorious. Now, as a side note, the spirit may actually want bloodshed here, or perhaps even death. So this could get a little tricky, but I'm sure you'll navigate it just fine. And the final step would be an open act of acknowledgement and respect. This would require the Vikings organization to publicly acknowledge that the likeness of Grettir in their logo and other promotional items was purely coincidental. And they would also have to offer to replace the current logo with the likeness of the Draug. And my message to the Vikings organization is this. Yes, I know this could be costly, but the Minnesota Draug, instantly the best logo and name in the league. Plus, bonus, there might no longer be a curse to worry about, so it's really a win-win. So there you have it, folks, a potential explanation and a possible solution to the Minnesota Vikings curse. Will it work? Who knows, but it's worth a shot, right? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more NFL lore. And if you enjoy what I do, consider supporting me on Patreon for special perks such as getting your name in the end credits of all my videos. Until next time, keep those horns held high, and may the odds be ever in your favor.